Hi, it's me, Alex, a stay-at-home reader, and it is still the first week of January. I'm going to wrap up 2023 with my favorite books of the year. And I managed to put them in an order, so going, 10 and counting down. Here we go. The first book I'm going to talk about in 10th place is The Atmospherians by Isle McElroy. I have it. I actually have some of these to hold up. A lot of these were library books, but hold on. This one here, Isle McElroy's The Atmospherians. I am covering a dead name. Part of why I love this book. Okay, so this book is very much tackling the idea of toxic masculinity, of preconceptions about femininity, and so there's a lot of gender discussion in this book, so much so that I have here a little note. This is actually an ARC copy that I found in a book bank, actually. Part of the New Haven Reads program locally. They have a book bank where you can go in and get books for free, and that's where I grabbed this one. So a note from Isle McElroy says, I began The Atmospherians intending to write a book that would explore and counter the ways I had been conditioned by masculine gender norms. What happened instead was a personal reckoning that was long overdue. Throughout my life, I had secretly questioned my male gender identity. Writing about masculine conditioning and its consequences day in and day out in my novel led me to confront the version of myself I presented to the world. Last year, as I finished the book, which I think this is from 2021 was published, I came out as non-binary. The Atmospherians played a major role in helping me trust and accept my identity. This book quite literally changed my life, and it would be an honor to share something so personal with you. Thank you for reading. That's how powerful this book was. I am so proud of this author who I now follow on Instagram. This was their debut novel. I have also read their sophomore novel this year. Like as soon as it came out, grabbed it from the library. Yeah, so the main character is a social media influencer who becomes a victim of cancel culture. And the whole situation surrounding that is bananas and basically comes down to society excusing men's behavior and blaming women. And so the only person who doesn't write her off is a high school friend of hers that she's kind of been in and out of contact with. And he is starting this project where he's opening a camp for men out of this abandoned summer camp in New Jersey. And the men there all fit into certain stereotypes of masculinity, and the goal of the camp is to fix them. Very, very interesting. Do not read this if you have I believe it's emetophobia, which is a phobia or a trigger with vomiting. Purging becomes a major accidental but like pivotal part of the therapy that they're using at this camp. Just a wild ride of a book. Number 9, I don't have a copy of. I read it, I think, around this time last year. The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa. Short book, lovely book, 5-star prediction. The only other Ogawa I had read was a short story collection. I think it's called Revenge. Very dark, but interesting, like connected short stories. And so this is like completely opposite. This is cozy. This is heartwarming about a woman who is a housekeeper assigned through an agency to work at the home of an old professor who has experienced a brain injury to the effect that he only can remember, like, I think it was like 80 minutes at a time, and then his memory is like wiped clear. So that process of short-term memory becoming long-term memory is damaged. And still, she is able to bond with him. He has methods of like pinning notes to his suit to keep himself aware of things that he's already learned. Like he has to like relearn them really quick. And he bonds with her son over a love of baseball. It's a beautiful story of the two generations bonding over a common interest. It was heartwarming, slow, cozy, just a very calming book. Recommend it. And number 8 is Lone Woman by Victor Lavelle. This is actually the first book I read in 2023, and it made it onto my top 10. I ended up reading 88 books over the year, and for the first book of the year to hold its place in my favorites, I think that's pretty good. There is a reading vlog. I started last year as my New Year's Eve reading vlog. It ended up being like a much longer span of time, but it covered my experience with this book. It is about a Black woman named Adelaide who is traveling. It's a Western. It's historical fiction. She's traveling west to claim land as a homesteader, and what she carries with her is this like super, super heavy steam trunk that only she seems to be able to lift. Like people helping her on ships or on wagons, like men, like 3-4 men are struggling with the steam trunk, and like then they look at her like, you dragged this? You were able to move this? So there's this ominous feeling of like, what the heck is in this trunk? And like, what does it represent? Obviously, she's burdened by something. She's running away from something. So is it like a manifestation of, you know, a weight on her, some sort of secret? And kind of, but it's also a horror story. And so this book turns into a creature feature. It explores racism, class, morality. 10, 9, 8. Number 7 is a very recent read, The Light Pirate by Lily Brooks Dalton. I've mentioned this. I think all of the books in my top 10 except for this one have reviews on my Instagram. This is a climate fiction novel. It takes place in the very, very near future in Florida. A Florida completely destroyed by changes in weather patterns and the intensity of hurricanes. It follows a little girl who is born during a hurricane, and then subsequently, like, it kind of jumps to 10 years, and then it jumps another batch of years, and just how society has changed. It's a story about survival. It's a story about a fault. Like, how did we get to this point, and what could we have done differently? It's a story about regret. And then there's this element to it that's like really weird, and you don't know where it's going for a while. Like, the first time it comes up, you're like, magic? Is this a fantasy climate fiction book? But then later there's this theme of like, what is magic, but something science hasn't explained yet. And so evolution becomes a major part of the story in a way that keeps it kind of hopeful. Like, this is literally a story about the near future, about the collapse of the planet and the devastation that makes it uninhabitable for humans, with this sense of hope that nature will rebalance itself. And if we're meant to be here, we will also experience a sort of evolution alongside like what's left in this new sort of planet. So I loved it. It's really sticking with me. I mean, I just finished it like a week ago. It was supposed to be a book club book. I didn't make it to the book club. I would have loved to be part of that conversation. Yeah, and I don't, if you know me for a little while now on Instagram, or here you're one of my like 5 friends that I made on BookTube, you'll know that climate fiction and apocalypse fiction was something a few years ago I could not read. When my book club read, Station 11. That was so hard for me. And then when COVID hit, like that was in the back of my mind, like super overwhelming, and it would make me panic, and it just really fed into my anxieties. But I think living through that pandemic, some of my biggest fears, and like being at this point where like we have to do something, I'm much more willing to talk about it and imagine like what comes next, where like also my anxiety is a lot more under control than it was. I actually found this book beautiful instead of terrifying. I mean, it's terrifying, but in a way I could handle. The next book, number 6, is The Midcoast by Adam White. This was read on Karen's recommendation. It is about a man returning to his hometown in Maine, and he realizes that the power couple, like the wealthy couple, he remembers from when he was a teenager, and they were pretty poor when he left. Like, how are they now the richest family? It opens with a party, this huge party at their huge house, and police arrive. And there's this file that's on a desk that the narrator sees, and there's like, it's a burnt car with a body in it, and you can't tell who it is. And then like police are showing up, and they're looking for this guy, the owner of the house. Forgot his name right now. Damn. Fred? And he's disappeared. And so you're like, all right, he did something. He murdered someone. Like, what happened? And then it goes back in time, and it fills in the story of, him being poor, the teenage pregnancy, and then, getting a job, or, being a lobsterman, and then just like them acquiring properties and becoming like property owners and making money that way, like in real estate. But there's also another element to his work that is illegal, and that's how the family's making their money. And so this is all being relayed without giving away, like, why did the police show up at this party? Like, we're working up to that party now. And so there's this like mystery, like, something bad's gonna happen, and you guess a few times what that thing is. But I think you get right up until the very end, like right up until that moment of where the book opened, it circles all the way back to. So right at the end is what you figure out what the issue is, what the mystery, like there's just this mysterious, heavy, like something is going to drop at any moment feeling throughout the whole story, and it takes you all the way to the end to get back to where you started. I loved it. I loved the sense of place. 5? Elsewhere by Alexis Schaitkin. This was an impulse grab at the library on the new release shelves. It is about an isolated village in the mountains. very rigid in their traditions, and their like seclusion. Like they only get one visitor, and it's the supplier who comes in with the truck and takes their orders and then goes back into town, and he's the one person that is not of their town that comes to their town. And as a place, they have this like communal sense of pride and also grief, because there is an affliction among mothers, well, among the like community in general. Mothers vanish, and you don't know who it's going to be, you don't know when it's going to happen. It's just you wake up one day and this mother is gone, and there's this whole ritual after that where, you know, everything about her, she's never spoken of again, and her existence is just denied. Like, we don't talk about it. And in that grief, this community feels like they're better than everyone else, because suffering through this makes them more aware of how important family is, of how strong mother and child connections are, because it could vanish at any moment. And so it makes them better than anywhere else, without ever having been anywhere else. Like they've really like gaslit themselves into thinking this affliction is what makes them strong. And so you follow a young girl whose mother has disappeared, and throughout her life she becomes a wife and mother, and she starts feeling this anxiety of motherhood and this pressure, and she starts worrying that she is going to be one of those mothers. And it was just a very emotional book. It's I feel like an allegory for postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. Not even allegory, like it's straight up, right? Like the stress of motherhood, the stress of being perfect, because there's this pressure, like any mistake a mother makes, everyone's watching her like, ooh, she's gonna be the next one to disappear. Like, so they're kind of like under a microscope. And so I think that was like kind of a pretty clever way of examining like social media trends and social media aesthetics, and this pressure to be the perfect, used to be Pinterest mom, now I think is it even Instagram mom anymore, like, or now it's like the TikTok mom, whatever. There's just this pressure to be a certain way, and then when something happens, everyone goes back and is like, aha, I knew it. You see, there is a much more coherent review on my Instagram. Sorry, I'm rambling. Number 4, several people are typing, by Calvin Kasulke. This was so different. It's this new kind of like internet genre novel where it's not written in text. The entire book is actually like chat messages. The main character has accidentally uploaded his consciousness into Slack, which I guess is a workplace I don't know, like messenger, or like not really social media. I don't really know. I don't work in an office. So, but so he's sending messages to people like, hey, can you help me? And I'm stuck in Slack, and they're like, haha, you're just really taking advantage of the new work from home policy, whatever, you're super like efficient and productive, keep working from home, we don't care, like you're getting the work done. I feel like there's a lot of like themes or like points being made throughout. Yeah, very much. This is what happens when capitalism values our productivity over our sense of self. What happens when all our communication is done online. There's like accountability, but there's also like an importance of like human contact is an element in here. I'll stop there, but the entire book is chat messages. So I found it really clever, really engaging, fun to read just because of the different format. It was kind of hysterical, kind of like horrifically creepy. But look, it's number 4. Like, it's so unique. I feel like it has to be up there. Number 3, let me get back to ones I actually own now. Now Is Not the Time to Panic by Kevin Wilson. I actually read it as a library book, and then it was announced as the One Book, One Wallingford selection. So Wallingford is a town near to me. The library hosted this reading event. I think it lasted a few months, where there were different events like an art competition, like a poster creation competition. There was like book club discussions, like cafe meetups or something like that. And then in April, Kevin Wilson came to, do a little author chat at the middle school, my first ever author event, and it was amazing. It was amazing. I totally channeled Karen in her, like, I'm gonna go do it myself. I had no one to go with me. My husband wasn't interested. And I went all by myself with Karen in my mind. And so I got him to sign it. He was great. Super, super relieved. This is the flyer for that whole One Book, One Wallingford. Super relieved that this author, who I had read before and loved, fell in love with this book, fell in love with his characters. They felt so relatable and so real. And then to hear him speak, like, he was also down to earth and like a sweetheart. Such a relief that he was a good guy, like in real life. That just really cemented my love of this book. What is this book? It is about 2 teenagers who meet one summer, and out of boredom, they create a piece of art. So Frankie, the girl, the main character, she is a writer, and she meets Zeke, I think is his name, but it's not actually his name. It's his middle name. He's trying a thing out for the summer. He's an artist. So she comes up with like this kind of like random like word association, just like comes up with this nonsense phrase, and he illustrates it, and they start slapping up posters around town, and the story is all about the reaction to these posters. It takes place in the 90s, I think. And so there's this like satanic panic reaction to it that was just very reminiscent to like how people reacted to things back then. Like, things got misinterpreted and taken out of control, and then like before they know it, this thing has snowballed into something so much bigger than them. They can't control the public's reaction to it. They can't control it's being printed on t-shirts and sold, and people think it's like a cult. People think they're like, local terrorists, like that they're dangerous, and then society's reaction makes it dangerous. And so the book is actually told like on reflection. Frankie is an adult, and someone has figured out that it was her behind this back in the 90s. And so she's kind of dealing with how this has shaped her life, remembering that summer, telling the story of that summer, and how like she's gone through life dealing with it. So good. So good. Number 2, The School for Good Mothers by Jessamine Chan. This was a 5-star prediction. Totally lives up to it. This book is basically Handmaid's Tale combined with Clockwork Orange, with probably some like Philip K. Dick thrown in there, who I've never actually read, but that whole like artificial I'm not gonna, okay, it's a twist. I'm done. Okay, it's a surprise. If you read this book, it's kind of a jaw drop moment. It's a really interesting exploration of what society expects. I'm still working on the sticker. What society expects on women. What's realistic? Like, is it possible to be the perfect mother? What is the perfect mother? Like, who's it? It was infuriating. This book was infuriating in the best way. But yeah, like I said, if you like Handmaid's Tale, if you like, I have to reread it. I haven't read it since high school. Clockwork Orange. Like, those are two of my favorite dystopians. And this felt like a really good emotional mix of those. And number 1 is Grindles Mother by Susan Susan Morrison. Someone tell me how that name, what is that? I don't even know what language of origin, so like how I could even pretend to attempt pronouncing it. Anyway, this is a feminist retelling of the monster Grendel's mother from the epic poem Beowulf. In the poem, Grendel's mother doesn't exist as much except a bloodthirsty, vengeful representation of female power. Like, female power is dangerous. Her son Grendel is killed by the hero Beowulf, and in revenge she attacks Harrod Hall, which previously Grendel had been terrorizing, and Beowulf follows her to her home beneath the lake, engages in a great battle with her, and kills her, and then returns and is a hero. He's saved Harrod Hall from these monsters. Sing his praise, right? Well, this is her story. She wasn't always a monster. She was a foundling child. She was a wronged queen. She was a loving mother. And that story we know of Beowulf, who's telling it and for what purpose? And so there's so much symbolism in here that runs parallel to the poem. And so you could just see like what the other side might be. It was just beautiful. I loved it so much. I love that it was a retelling. I reread Beowulf September of not 23, the year before that, 22. For Shorty September, and after that I read Grendel by John Gardner. And so then this was this year's Shorty September's like highlight. Again, a review on my Instagram for more coherent thoughts. That's all I got. One book that I would say, no, it's not one of my favorite books of the year. It is, but not in the same way. This is probably the most important book I read all year. For obvious reasons, this is called Except for Palestine, The Limits of Progressive Politics by Mark Lamont Hill and Mitchell Plitnick. I believe Mitchell Plitnick runs Jewish Voices for Peace. I think is something I learned in the course of reading and being online. So powerful. It breaks into, the book is broken into 4 sections: the right to exist, criminalizing BDS, trumped up policy, and the crisis in Gaza. And by taking like those sections each one at a time, I feel like and it's not excuse me, it's not terribly long, so obviously it's not a complete history, a complete analysis of this current situation, but it is an excellent primer or place to start. Like, it gave me a lot of information that I knew nothing about. I knew disgustingly nothing in terms of Palestine. Obviously, our world changed on October 7th, and this just became a very important read, like a topic that I wanted to know more about. I bought other books. This was the easiest to read for someone who knew nothing previously, and so now I am going to go back and read more history. That's 2023 wrapped up. I'm going to stop talking about 2023. We're moving on, 2024. So I'll be back to talk about that. Bye.